Well, as you can probably tell by my voice, the second test has taken just as much of a toll on me as it has on India-Australia relations. But we've got a bit of time now between the second and third test in Ranchi. So I've come to Delhi. I did spend an hour circling in an aeroplane last night, so I didn't get in till 1 o'clock. Up bright and early this morning and going on a little bit of a road trip to Meerut to see what we can see there.
Meerut is hardly the best known city in India, but it's the home of one of its most famous cricket names, Salisbury Greenland, or SG, makers of India's Test cricket ball. I've visited the Kookaburra factory in Melbourne in the past, and from the outside here, I'm struck by the distinct resemblance between the two factories. Both are family companies, but SG has a unique history. The factory doesn't just produce balls. In peak season, up to 1,400 bats are made each day. And even bales are meticulously carved by craftsmen. But it's the creation of the SG balls that particularly interests me.
First process is when the leather is tanned and we receive it over there. You know, if you notice, they've got the leather piece with them, the big piece. Once the leather is received by us from the tanning, it's then pressed on this machine, and that's done to make the leather soft, you know. So they put it under the pressing machine, and we need the leather to be soft, you know, so that stitching the pieces becomes easier. And then once the leather is pressed over here, then cut into 4 quarters. So that's the process happening over there, right at the end. And then the quarters are stitched together to make the cup.
These guys are amazingly dexterous with their feet. It's
very,
like they've got 4 hands, not 2 hands, 2 feet. It's like they've got four hands.
And it's not easy, you know, sitting like this for 8 hours, and it's just amazing. So the next stage is they'll put a layer of leather in the cup. And then they'll press it on this machine. So this is done just to make sure that there is no gap between the core and the base. What these people are doing here is they're just waxing the thread.
Okay, I wondered if that's what they were doing.
Yeah,
so they've got wax on their hands on
Yes. So and again, the reason for doing that is, you know, it helps when they're stitching with the needle. The wax actually helps them, you know, in the entire process. You know, just makes stitching a bit easier for them. Then we have the core. Which is, like you can see, there are layers of core. And then you've got woolen thread on top of it. So the next step would be you put the 2 cups together and you stitch the center stitch, which is also called the lip stitch. And this is the most important stitch in the cricket ball.
They're putting the...
Yeah, so once you've done the lip stitch, then the last process of stitching is they'll be stitching the seam, you know. So if you just see what he's doing, you know, he's actually, the seam is, they're piercing the leather with the needle and then just stitching right across. And this process will give you both the inside and the outside seam. The guys who do the grade 1 ball, you know, they're so accurate. It looks like it's done by machine.
Yeah, it does. It looks like it's machine stitched. I'm amazed.
See how consistent it is.
It's incredibly consistent.
And believe me, this is the toughest skill to have, you know, to actually stitch the seam. Across all categories of products that we manufacture, this is the toughest.
Even the lacquer is applied by hand.
Yes. Unlike the spray paint which you have seen over there.
Yeah, I've seen the spray paint, but this is...
In fact, this is how they used to make maybe 30, 40 years back.
Yeah.
When we receive the ball from the production floor, this is the first process that they do. You know, they do the branding on the ball.
Okay.
I'm blown away by the detailed care, the skill and the dexterity of the 165 workers who turn out 900 to 1,000 balls here every day. I'm also curious about how the characteristics of the SG ball make it behave differently to the other test balls.
Okay, so Paris, I do happen to have smuggled into the country a kookaburra. Now I've got an SG ball here. Just specifically, I can see differences just with my very untrained amateur eye. I can see differences in the seams. These look like the seams even. The SG ball looks like it's slightly closer, the seams?
Yes. So if you notice that, one thing is that the seam is closer in the SG ball compared to the kookaburra ball. The thickness of the thread, you'll notice that, visually it looks thicker than the kookaburra ball. And like you rightly said, it feels more pronounced. But in the once the game is played, say after 25 overs, you notice that the seam in this SG ball remains prominent, compared to a kookaburra ball. So that's one major difference, when you play with both these balls. With the wrist spinner, he's not dependent so much on the seam, so he can actually use the ball from the center part as well, the other side of the seam. But for finger spinners, the off spinners which we have in India, they really depend a lot on the seam, and the seam lasting for as long as possible, for them to get a grip and for them to
rip it out of the surface of the pitch. Now, I'm going to be really cheeky. I have managed to steal this from the kookaburra factory. Could I please steal one of these?
You're most welcome to steal it.
I'm getting a collection. Jukes, I'm coming for you next.
My very own SG ball. Makes for a pretty good souvenir, and let's face it, I don't get much time for shopping when I'm on the road.